friends. Welcome to the Ancient Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Motley. And today, let's talk about brain fog. Constant chronic brain fog. Do you have this condition? Do you have problems with short-term memory loss or slurring your words? Trying to look through the haze? Have you ever been told it's a product of you getting older and that we, as we get older, just forget things? If you're young and you're starting to have memory lapses, you should not have these types of conditions at any age. So we want to talk about brain fog, memory issues, and the components of what causes the brain fog, such as chronic infections. So we'll talk about chronic Lyme disease, strep, staph, E. coli bacterial infections, H. pylori, digestive systems, and how this all can correlate into the brain. We also want to talk about the chemical components of the actual toxins that could make their way into your brain. And we'll name off a few simple ones, such as ammonia and even formic acid or aldehyde or acetaldehyde, and how the infections create this and it stays dormant or stays in the bloodstream, in the brain tissue, and how that can actually decrease mental activity. And what are the things that you and I could do to actually help decrease those toxicities and those infections to bring our neural activity back up to par? So we're going to discuss the herbs such as Malea supreme. We're going to talk about Japanese knotweed, cat's claw, the tinctures that my good friend Dr. Alan Lindsley creates, the LSF formulas 1 through 5 that are for the components of Lyme disease. And these are the actual herbs that I've seen work really well with my patients with brain fog. And they're not the only ones, but I want you to take note of those, that we can use herbs and other compounds such as glutamine and butyric acid, butyric, butyric acid, and how they can actually help drain many of the toxins out of the body. So today, let's first start off and talk about the actual components of brain fog. So brain fog is where you feel like you can't see clearly through your mind's eye. Now, when we talk about brain fog, have you ever been walking down the street or walking anywhere or in your car, and your brain is so cloudy that you almost feel like you're almost watching yourself from a distance? I don't know how to explain it very well, but when I had Lyme disease, I had such bad brain fog that I would literally feel like when I was walking on the sidewalk, it was almost like I was aloof and I was looking down at myself because I did not feel connected to my brain. I felt that I was looking at myself from a distance because I was not present in my body. And that is a neurological component of brain fog that actually keeps you from having the proper neurological functioning to keep your brain and your body in sync. It's a common thing in brain fog. So if you feel that way, or if you look at a distance or close and you feel like you can't have clear vision, but at certain times, you feel like, oh, my sight's a little bit better today. Have you ever had that? And I know if you go to the doctor, the eye doctor, they'll say, no, nothing's wrong with your eyes. You don't have any cataracts. You don't have any type of macular degeneration. But you're thinking, why in the world do I feel like I'm seeing haziness in front of my eyes? But the doctor is telling me that there's nothing wrong with my eyes, and it's happening at fluctuating times. It's happening one day pretty heavily, and the next day it doesn't. Well, there are explanations of how your brain can build up a lot of toxicities, and those toxins do not drain properly because we have what we call microinfections that can get into the brain. And if you have chronic brain fog and you have chronic infections, it will diminish the amounts of good fats, amino acids, the components that feed your brain, all the nutrients, they can be deteriorated and eaten up by chronic infections. And I want you guys not to just follow my word for it, but if you look at like good websites like ScienceDirect.com and good research studies, they'll tell you about how different types of infections through journals in medical research journals, how infections have gotten into the brain and they can actually diminish the neuronal activity. So when we talk about infections, they're breaking through the blood-brain barrier. we have a barrier in our arteries that are very, very succinct, very tight. They have a polaric bond, which means they have an electrical charge in the arteries of our brain that keep the infections out. When you have undigested food particles, if you have any type of infections roaming around, there is a very great barrier between your blood vessel that goes to the brain and the infection. So the infection should not be able to get through that web, that polaric electrical wall, to make its way into the into the bloodstream, to get up to your brain to cause infection. Now, the problem that we have today is the high inflammation patterns. Chronic food issues, chronic infections. Chronic food sources of inflammatory effect are basically things with high fructose corn syrup, genetically modified foods, anything that's fake, that has fake fats, plastics in the actual food. If you have anything that is canned or put in a bag or it has preservatives in them, if you look at the label and you can't read the name of the ingredient because you never heard it before, those are the preservatives. Those types of food wreak havoc on your digestive system and cause leaky gut syndrome or digestive impairment. And what happens is you start to have the weakening of the lining of the stomach, but you also have the weakening of the lining to be able to keep the bad guys out of your bloodstream. Your gut lining is meant to have a mucosal layer that's so thick and so strong that the white blood cells in that mucosal layer are there to clean out the infections that are trying to make their way into your bloodstream. Your foods are broken down. The mucosal layer, the lining of the gut, then chooses certain nutrients to make their way through your gut lining and through the passages into the bloodstream, little doors. Your body's so smart and so actively looking for nutrients that it'll allow certain nutrients to go through if it meets the standard, if it meets the quota of the biology of the person. When the mucosal layer gets thinner and the inflammation gets higher, it actually changes the activity of the immune cells in the digestive tract. And this can actually widen the pores, the holes in the digestive tract, allowing food particles to go through those little holes into your bloodstream. It also allows the parasites and even the fungus and the yeast, bacteria like E. coli, H. pylori, to make their way through those holes as well and get to your bloodstream. They go through the bloodstream and they start to maneuver through the body, and they'll find areas that they like the best. They'll make their way into the joints because the joints have glucosamine, sugars, and amino acids, and they'll feed off that, and they'll start to eventually create arthritis. They'll make their way up to the neck. They'll find their way into the lymph nodes and use the lymph nodes, the own B lymphocytes, to actually crowd around the infections and wall off the infection in your lymph nodes where they sit and they stay dormant, where you get the lumpy lymph nodes. Your lymph nodes are trying to attack them, but they can trick your body into allowing them to survive. So you have a chronic lymph node issue where you have the lumps and the bumps all over the neck. They then can make their way up into the brain, into the sinus cavities. And your blood-brain barrier, the transfer of nutrients from your bloodstream over into the arteries of the blood-brain barrier, should be so strong that it wouldn't allow the infections to get there, or the undigested food particles. But the chronic inflammatory foods we eat has been shown to weaken the blood-brain barrier and injure the blood-brain barrier. So we have the digestive system being broken down and basically ruined from all the high fructose corn syrup, all the sugars, all the pesticides we eat, all the grains that are not healthy for our body, and all the straight digestive inflammatory agents that we see in everyday culture. And then as it gets to the brain, those little infections, they are going to an area that's already inflamed. Blood sugar rises. They've shown that neuronal glial cell activity has actually been injured and inflamed, causing more high inflammatory states of the brain when there's high amounts of sugar. Your brain wants sugar. It needs it to function. It also needs fats and proteins and amino acids, but it loves sugar. And so it goes into this area. And so they're finding that even the mucosal layer of the brain, there's a healthy mucosal layer in certain areas of the brain that protect the brain. And when this is injured and the blood-brain barrier is inflamed, they've shown that the arterial walls of the arteries in the brain have actually been weakened and loosened because that tight junction starts to spread. And now you have the infections waiting to get into the brain because where's all the sugar? In the brain. Where are all the good fats? In the brain. The infections such as Lyme disease, strep, babesia, which is a Lyme disease co-infection, rickettsia, ehrlichia, these are all Lyme disease co-infections. Even some staph has been identified in the brain. And now they're showing reports that E. coli and H. pylori are making their way into the brain. I myself have had H. pylori in the brain. And these have all been correlated to have brain memory issues, giving dementia-like symptoms. I realized I had something else going on in my brain after I had Lyme disease, and I was starting to slur words. Even though I was doing my methylation therapy with good nutrients and good vitamins, I started noticing I was slurring words. And so I did extra testing and found out that I had higher amounts of H. pylori and some extra babesia toxicity around the back of my head. So I started to use and utilize Avant laser. I'm not plugging them, I get any money from, but Avant laser, it's a cold laser therapy. I started using this to use the frequencies for H. pylori and for certain Lyme infections and toxicities, and it started to drain all of this stuff out of my back of my head. I could feel it just draining from the back of my eyes, like near literally those small, what we call ventricles, those small sinus areas in the brain. And I was feeling such a rush of basically cleansing through my brain that I was so surprised that it had been stuck up there that long. But the infections, when they camp out and they can make their way through the blood-brain barrier, they're going to get areas where there's going to be extra sugars, extra fats, because they feed off these things, and actual proteins like blood proteins. That's why these Lyme-related infections love hemoglobin. They love blood proteins. They love fats. And in fact, a lot of these infections love to go to the components of the nerve cells because the nerve cells are creating so much energy through mitochondrial ATP that they go and they're attracted to it and they're going to go eat it. So they'll make their way and they'll damage the sheathing, the layers around your nerves that give you fast pulsation, fast movement of nerve signals through your brain. So you have these infections making their way in. They're eating up the fats. They're eating up the fats around your nerves. They're eating up all the sugar. They're starting to eat up the fats of your brain because your brain's mostly made out of fat. And then you start to see people that have infections of the brain that have these small ventricles that are widening. The cavities, the sinuses are widening because of the deterioration of the brain tissue from the infections. They have shown reports that there are certain parasites that get into the brain. Leishmania, trypanosoma. They've even showed evidence of certain types of tapeworms. Now, this is one of the things I tell my peeps out there that I'm not trying to sound scary. I just want you to know that if you have brain fog, it does not mean that you have parasites or bacteria or chronic Lyme disease. What I am saying is when I had slurring of words, when I had mental issues, brain issues, when my mood changed and I couldn't explain it, I was getting irritated and angry. I was feeling a little suicidal and I was so sick internally that I went on a quest and found out that I had Lyme disease. My good friend, Dr. Lindsley, who created the tinctures, found it on me. When those infections are wading out into the brain and I was eating inflammatory foods and then it got into my brain, then the infections start to poop. They basically give off toxicities. So if you have chronic infections, please test for Lyme disease. I mean, basically brain fog. If you guys have chronic brain fog, look into chronic infections such as Lyme disease, strep, staph, E. coli, and H. pylori. Even Epstein-Barr virus, I'm going to throw that in there. So what I like to do is use a urinalysis test. DNA connections with an X. CONNEXIONS.com. I'm going to put that in the show notes. DNAconnections.com is a good starter with Lyme disease testing. There are many other companies out there. IGeneX does a good one, IGENEX.com. They do blood testing. They do urinalysis testing. They can find out if you have Lyme disease going through the system. If you want to find out strep or staph, I would recommend that you go to Microgen DX, MICROGEN, MicrogenDX.com, and get any place that's closest to the brain, which is the sinus cavities. If you find things in the sinus cavities, in the ears, throat, tonsils, nasal area, you're pretty much going to know that you found something that's also in the brain. So I usually get this SinuKey for the sinuses, SINUKEY. They may have new tests out at Microgen, but I found that works really well. Or if you get a blood test, what they do is they test for 50,000 different types of bacteria that can count to see if there's any type of strep, staph, H. pylori, E. coli. And if you've ever had a bad case of food poisoning or a bad case of heartburn, heartburn's H. pylori. E. coli is food poisoning. I've had individuals that have had great amounts of brain fog and memory lapse when they didn't even realize they had food poisoning 10 years ago. No joke. Patient of mine literally had brain fog so bad that she was afraid that she was going to lose her memory. But she had an incident about 10 years ago that we remember. She was she's a patient back then. And we remember the time she had such bad food poisoning. Now it went dormant, thinking that we cleaned it up. But it made its way up to the brain. And the reason being is because infections that we think we get rid of usually hide and get dormant, and they're smart. And we have to use a shotgun effect to clean out the infections, come at different angles, use one herb for 1 or 2 weeks, maybe 3, and then change them up because they'll get used to it. But the E. coli was still there. So if you found that you had E. coli or H. pylori or any of these and you think, oh, it's a moderate amount. Oh, there's some Lyme disease. Maybe nothing to worry about. Maybe take some doxycycline or, amoxicillin antibiotics. If you've had that, please don't disregard it. I'm not saying that you're hypervigilant and you're going into it and saying, I'm so scared I'm living as a hypochondriac. What I am saying is when the infections come in and start to give off their poop, it can lead into dementia type symptoms. It could lead to memory loss and heavy amounts of brain fog. And it's been associated now that Lyme disease and its toxicities have been associated with Alzheimer's and dementia, even MS. CDC has said if you have MS or any type of Parkinson or dementia, Lyme disease is another possibility. So what are the things you want to add in? You start to test those for the bacteria, Microgen DX, DNA connections, maybe IGeneX, and then you want to look for organic acids or organic acid testing. You could look into Mosaic Labs. Mosaic Labs is a good one, and Mosaic Labs does well with testing for organic acids from yeast, mold, fungus. Now, we talk about a bacterial toxin like ammonia. Ammonia can be given off by Lyme disease. Yes, ammonia, NH4. Ammonia is a byproduct not only of when we eat lots of meats and heavy proteins, it breaks down to ammonia. But the Lyme disease can actually create ammonia as a waste byproduct. And so it's a little like sniffing ammonia. It's a neurotoxin. You can use glutamine powder to help absorb the ammonia and actually heal the gut lining. That's one aspect that you want to look into when you have neurotoxicity. Another common one we look at for organic acids. Now, when you get the organic acid test, that is for the mold and fungus. If you find high amounts organic acids floating in the blood, like ammonia or ochratoxin. That's a big one. Fusarium toxins. You need to work with a mold-literate doctor that can actually help you get rid of the mold and the toxicities. So when I find that with my patients, I use glutamine for ammonia, but I use binders. Now, there are many places out there that have good binders. I know that Cellcore, they have biotoxin binder. You can look into Cellcore, CELLCORE, biotoxin binder. You can also look into butyric acid, BUTYRIC acid. Now, those are some basic ones that you can use to help absorb aldehydes and ammonia and any organic acids. Now, when we talk about aldehydes, acetaldehyde, and formaldehyde can be byproducts of the fungus and the yeast. They literally take ethanol, alcohol, out of your diet, or they'll take sugar and produced ethanol or alcohol, or they can also take the alcohol and other funguses can take that and make acetaldehyde. So people walk around feeling drunk in their brain and they feel all this fog as they walk through life because they have yeast that's creating such acetaldehyde and ethanol, literally alcohol in your body, and they can't get rid of it. So that's where you get non-fatty alcohol liver syndrome. So just follow along, guys. If you have a test that looks for organic acids and you have these things, look into the binders. Now, Cellcore has quite a bit of binders. They have Virad Chem binders for, different types of radiation and viral toxicities. And they use certain herbal components to actually help draw up the poisons and toxins. But if you work with a mold literate doctor or a Lyme literate doctor, these are just examples like what I want to give to you that would actually absorb the toxicities. One of the best that I think is out there is going to be humic and fulvic minerals. Humic and fulvic minerals are like Mother Earth Labs. I mean, even Cellcore has them, and there's a few other places out there, companies that use the fulvic and mineral components to actually draw in the poisons. Now, you can use a charcoal, such as a bamboo charcoal like Takasumi from Supreme Nutrition Products, or you can use any type of charcoal, but research binders that get rid of alcohol, ethanol, acetaldehyde, acetaldehyde. I hope I spelled that right. But when you look at those, there's other components. There's things such as reactive oxygen species, formic acid, indolic acids. Now, these are all the infection toxins. But if you find a good binder from the companies I just mentioned, you can start to draw the poisons out. Another good thing is to get basically an antioxidant. I love Olive Leaf Supreme. It's a great antioxidant. It's one of the best antioxidants, in my opinion, olive leaf. And I like to use those that have vitamin C, vitamin E, alpha lipoic acid, CoQ10. I love to use vitamin D. And I like to use magnesium and a multiple mineral like the humic and fulvic. Now, the reason I do it is because you have components in your cell walls. The cell walls has an electron transport system. And now this is all going to sound fancy, but what happens for you guys out there with brain fog, your cells have to transport electrons through these little portals, these little walls. And what they're doing, they're passing along electrons through the wall. And that energy that's being created through the passing of the electrons is basically, in a nutshell, creating energy within your cells. The components like the CoQ10, alpha lipoic acid, vitamin E, and vitamin C, they're needed to keep that electron transport system going. So if you have brain fog and you're not getting a steady diet of these components within your diet, your cells cannot create energy. So you can take all the binders in the world, but you're going to keep getting the brain fog if you don't give the components of your cells to make energy. I'm a big component of that. I'm a big proponent. So when we talk about anything to help with the electron transport system, that's going to give you energy to help get those toxins out of the cell. So other components, guys, listen to this. Look for any nutrient that helps with the electron transport system. Let's go over it again. CoQ10, alpha lipoic acid, vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin D, and I always look for a good vitamin B complex that's methylated, especially vitamins B1, B2, B3, B6, and a B12 adenosylcobalamin. But look for a methylated B complex. Now, if you take these, you want to be able to flush the toxins out. And so now we have the options to kill off the infections, get rid of the toxicities and start to draw them out. And whenever I look into a patient's testing components, and I find that they've had all the toxicities in the brain, and I start them on different things to bring up energy and also to absorb the toxins, I will go in and use certain herbals that are my favorite. So I'm just going to name them off to you. Number one, we're going to use cat's claw. Cat's claw is a great anti-inflammatory. It's one of the top herbs that you use in Chinese medicine and in Lyme disease related bacteria and parasite cleansing. Japanese knotweed is also used, but it's so good at cleansing out the mucus. It's good at killing off Epstein-Barr virus, and it's good at just flushing the mucus type layers out of the system that can hold Lyme disease or any of its correlated infections. Now, I like cat's claw, Japanese knotweed. I can't forget Malia. Malia Supreme is great. Malia is neem. It will kill off yeast and mold and fungus and parasites and bacteria. That is one of my favorites too. It's a multi-antimicrobial. I like my good friend, Dr. Alan Lindsley, who is a big proponent of energy. He's like the energy doc. And he talks a lot about how you have to create the energy. And that makes getting rid of the infections even just the more easy. Now, the reason we have to be careful is because if we do give a lot of the energy components within the cells and we're not busy cleaning out the infections, some of the infections could eat some of those components, some of those nutrients. So what you're trying to do is use the herbs as you do take the nutrients, the vitamins and minerals I just mentioned, and it'll cleanse them out. So I think one of my favorites is going to be black walnut. Black walnut's one of my favorite. Black walnut is one that kills off every single infection, but I have found when I test on patients that black walnut, for me, a dropper full in the morning and a dropper full at night, will clean up so much neurological infection, along with my Japanese knotweed and my cat's claw, that I start to flush and get more clear-headed. Work with a Lyme literate doctor and a mold literate doctor, but look into black walnut. If you have a nut allergy, don't take it. But if you look into the properties of black walnut, it is amazing. So I love black walnut, and Dr. Lindsley has formulas that I love. They're multi-herbal. It gives a shotgun effect to kill off infections such as Lyme, Babesia, Bartonella, Ehrlichia, Rickettsia, and parasites. Look into his products. Look at his website, Nature's Pharmacy LLC. Nature's Pharmacy LLC. I also want you to look into the work of Dr. Glenn Wilcox, Glenn Wilcox. I think he's out of New Mexico, but he uses different types of juices and herbal concoctions to clean out Lyme and parasites. It's amazing, but it helps with brain fog. These are things you need to look into to help with the brain and start to utilize these herbal components to help start to flush the body. But don't just stop there. If you're learning more about these things, keep going further. Keep learning more, because you're going to learn more things that help keep the brain clean. Now, there's another thing that Dr. Cleancart says is good for Lyme in the brain and brain fog. It's called Cistus T. It's Cistus. Now, I believe it's how it's spelled, but he uses that, and he says he has patients drink 7 to 8 cups a day. And it's one of the things that keeps the virus components of Lyme disease and the replication patterns of the Lyme disease from occurring. So look into that too. I've been studying that more and trying to use that more in patients. I think one of the last components, guys, is that what are the therapies that I would recommend that you use? I've been using the Avant laser because it has the different frequencies for the infections to help clean up certain areas of the body. And what I love is that you can put it on the area where you're feeling the most pressure and the most brain fog. Maybe it's all over. It's okay. Put it at GV20 or on the back of the head on the governing vessel meridian. But what I've found is I use the red light and then the violet light to clean up infections. Violet light on this device is there to clean up the infections and the microbes. That's what a violet light does. Ultraviolet. And then you have the red light that is good for the inflammation and the actual heat producing effects of the infection. So you have a good double component. Now look into Avant Wellness. They have such a good laser. It's about $7,000-8,000, I believe, but the effects it's had on my patients and on myself and on my mom is tremendous. That's just one aspect. Look into infrared therapies. Look at BioLight Shop. Dr. Mike Belkowski, he has such good information about infrared technology. But look into infrared technology and its effect on cleansing the brain. Look at like the Avant Wellness. Look at those light therapies. Infrared, red, violet light therapy, ultraviolet light therapy that can clean the brain out. Those are some of my favorite. Let me check out a couple more. I want to make sure that we talk about ozone. Ozone is one of my favorites as well. Ozone is going to be the thing that I have seen just creep up on me as in one of the best therapies that I've seen work so far. If you can go to a lab, go to a spa, or go to a lab that uses different amounts of passes of ozone intravenously, and some go through the nostril. But you can get so many passes into so many therapy sessions. Maybe it's 15 to 20, and you do this over a certain set of weeks. I've seen patients that have had diabetes, that have chronic Lyme, chronic yeast and mold infections, clean all those out by using ozone. O3. So add ozone into the cleansing aspect of the brain. And they have now components or different devices that actually clean cholesterol out of the blood, that actually take the blood and actually run it through ultraviolet light and actually run ozone in the blood. There are many new technology devices out there that actually clean the blood. Please research ultraviolet blood therapy and ozone blood therapy. Those are what I've seen work very well along with these herbs. But remember, this is here just to give you an idea of what you can do for your brain fog. Is it that serious? Yes. You don't want to grow up, and I don't want to grow up having dementia or any type of brain or memory issues. We want to live in vitality and vibrance. And one of the ways is to create the energy, get the Krebs cycle going with all those vitamins and minerals, kill off the infections with the herbs, and then utilize some of the infrared and the violet light therapy to help strengthen the tissue. Get the ozone going as well. If you have any questions, guys, please send me some questions here in the comment section. If you like this kind of information, let me know. Add a like and subscribe if you like this kind of information. But we want to make it practical and simple and easy steps for you to follow to get more information so you can start healing. If you have the brain fog, please follow these steps or utilize them in any way you can. Let me know what you think. I hope you guys have a blessed day. Talk soon, and until next time, have a great day.